Welcome to Doctors Unbound, your show devoted to doctors who are, well, unbound by physician stereotypes. Get a behind-the-scenes look at doctors that are breaking the mold and breaking into the worlds of technology, writing, investing, politics, just to name a few. This is Doctors Unbound, where you'll hear from experts with the insights to help you go to the next level. Let's get this show started. Here is your host, Dr. Dave Draginas.
What's up, party doctors? Welcome again to the next episode of Doctors Unbound. Ever want to write a book? Or wonder what it takes to get one published? Well, today's guest has been there and she's done that. Besides being a physician and a super mommy, she has published a medical thriller titled What They Don't Know. Currently 4.5 stars on Amazon if you'd like to support a fellow physician. We go deep into writing in this interview, but some of the takeaways from this episode include tips to get the actual writing done, dealing with editing and publishing issues, and top mistakes to avoid. If you've ever thought about writing a book or think that you might have one in you, you don't want to miss this conversation with Dr. Kristine Scruggs. All right, welcome to another episode of the Doctors Unbound podcast. I am so excited to have Dr. Kristine Scruggs with us today, who is a physician who has transitioned into writing. In fact, she has a medical thriller called What They Don't Know. So we're going to talk to Kristine about medical writing transitions into that field. Kristine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to hear about your story. We're going to get all into the writing, into your book, but can you please give us first a background into where you grew up, where you went to school, all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so I actually grew up partially in Northeast Georgia and partially in Northwest South Carolina. So those two places are very close to each other. Went to Clemson University, football national champs.
That's right. They had a very good year there.
Yes, yeah. And then I went to MUSC in Charleston, South Carolina for medical school. After that, I met my husband in medical school, and we both moved to Chapel Hill, where we did residency training. And I currently live in Raleigh, North Carolina, right down the road from Chapel Hill.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, Clemson had a good year. I don't think anybody gave them much of a chance against Alabama, but they pulled it off. It was a pretty awesome game.
Yeah, we did.
And tell me a little bit more about medicine. Are you practicing? Did you practice at one point? Where are you at with that?
I am currently practicing. I'm a hospitalist. I've been a hospitalist for 7 years, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically I'm internal medicine by training. I just take care of patients while they're in the hospital. So I don't have an outpatient practice or anything like that.
Yep, I'm an anesthesiologist, and we work with hospitalists probably in most of the hospitals that we cover at this point.
Yeah, it's getting pretty.
It is. It's getting very, very common. So you've written this book. Did you always know that you wanted to write?
I will say, if, people ask you what you would do if money didn't matter or anything like that. And
right.
I will say in high school, that's probably what I would have said. I would have written and read for a living if I thought I could do that successfully. I was always very artsy in that way, not in I can't paint or draw, but I've always loved the written word. But I was good at science and math too, and so I went into medicine, and that's been a great career. I didn't have a lot of time to either read for pleasure or do much writing during med school and residency and the beginning of my career, but as things sort of settled down and I got a little more stabilized in my job and had some free time, I picked it back up.
That's awesome. I think a lot of times in medicine, it takes like you said, it takes so much of your time to train that our creative outlets sometimes get left on the wayside. So I think that's fantastic that you were able to get back into it. How did you go about kind of getting back into writing?
So I will say, I had a sort of, traumatic experience, work related, that got me back into it. So it was a little bit of a, in hindsight, it was a good thing, but it was, basically I sat down and started writing as sort of, my personal brand of therapy. And before I knew it, I was writing a story, and the story turned into a book. And that's what sort of got me back into it.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Did you seek out any mentors, or did you kind of do some research about, kind of getting more serious about it, or how did that go for you?
Yeah, so I think I did always think writing a book would be really cool. I don't know that I had it in my, life plan for sure, but when this started turning into a lengthier story and I thought it might be a book, I did start sort of just researching what goes into publishing a book and how do you write the best book and that sort of thing. So I read a lot of books on writing.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of research online. Writers' conferences are huge. Everybody tells you to go to them, and there's a reason for that. I went to a couple of writers' conferences and just loved it. Loved the energy that's there, and everybody's sort of on the same page, trying to do the same thing. And the classes on, marketing are interesting. The classes on craft are interesting, but the network is amazing. So
that's awesome. I just got back from Podcast Movement, and I felt like my head was going to creatively explode. It was just amazing. Like you said, networking, meeting with people, just the ideas, just the energy of all of these people that are interested in podcasting, and they're all doing kind of their own thing, approaching it from their own angle and interests. But it was really refreshing, because I think in medicine we kind of get like I don't know if drudgery is the right word, but you kind of get into the routine of the day to day. And to go to a conference like that, it was kind of liberating in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's great. And I haven't been to one in a couple of years, but I definitely miss it. And I need to get back to a conference because it's very energizing.
Awesome. Yeah, I would highly recommend that to any physicians to go to a conference in some kind of interest that you have that is outside of medicine. Just find a conference or event related to it. I don't think you will regret that you will do that.
Yeah.
Very
Agreed.
cool. Very cool. So kind of take us a little bit further down the journey. So you're kind of starting to write, you're starting to research, kind of what goes into it. What was the next step?
So everything I read about writing was, there's a couple major points. One is you have to give yourself permission to write badly, because otherwise you'll get writer's block and you'll never make any progress because you'll work on that same sentence for an hour. So I basically committed to writing 1,000 words a day. And sometimes those 1,000 words got, scrapped, but a lot of times it gave me that forward momentum. And 1,000 words a day gets you a full-length novel in about 3 months. So I made time when my oldest son at the time was 1, made time when he was sleeping or, before he woke up in the mornings or whenever. And I knew if it was time to go to bed and I hadn't done my 1,000 words, then I was doing it before my head hit the pillow. So I made that happen most days and got my rough draft in about 3 months.
Wow, that is impressive. But you're the second writer that I've heard reference that kind of a routine. I think it was Ben Meserich on another podcast. And he talked about having a word count. It wasn't writing for a certain number of hours. It was a word count that he needed to hit every day. And whether it was 1 hour or 5 hours, he was going to get his word count for the day. I guess that goal-oriented way of doing it is impressive. But you did it with little kids too?
Yes, I'm a glutton for punishment. I actually started writing before I had kids, but the book What They Don't Know that you referenced, that's actually been published, I started writing when my oldest was 1 and now he's 4. So that just gives you an idea of the timetable. But yeah, I guess I kind of just felt like at 1, I was getting out of that cloud of being a new parent and just wanted to pursue some other interests.
Well, that's awesome. We've got three. I've got a 4-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and an 11th-month-old. So I definitely know what that means to try and juggle parenthood with trying to do a project on top of working. Any sort of tips for the physician parents out there that are trying to juggle some kind of a side project on how to do that with little kids?
I think you have to make a commitment and stick with it, and your partner definitely has to support that.
Yes.
Because fighting for time to do, a hobby, if that's what you consider it, other things will definitely take priority if you let them. So, and sometimes that's appropriate, but if you make a commitment and just see it as another job, that mind frame can make it easier. Also, I think don't be afraid to ask for help or arrange for help, whether it's getting the house cleaned so that you have that time, or getting somebody to help with meals, or having meals delivered, or asking your partner to take the kids out for the afternoon, whatever it is. Like, as physicians, we want to control everything.
Right.
And sometimes you just have to do it all.
Those are all good tips. What did you find to be the most challenging thing of making a transition from physician to writer?
Well, as you sort of alluded to before, medicine is a lot of times very black and white. Mm-hmm. It's, algorithmic, and it's, by the time you've been practicing for a little while, it's sort of everything's habit and rote, and, writing a book, no day is the same as the day before. Involves the creative part of your brain that maybe you shut off when you're at work a lot of times. So whatever you can do to sort of get yourself in that creative vein, whether it's going to a coffee shop or listening to music or sitting in your favorite spot in your house, turning off your phone, whatever it is that you need to do to sort of get in that place, which can be difficult, but that's important.
I definitely agree. It's hard. It's hard to get into that mood, especially when you have a lot of things swirling around, including little kids that are vying for your attention. Let's talk a little bit about your book, What They Don't Know, a medical thriller. I saw that you have 4.5 stars on Amazon, so congratulations. That's pretty awesome. And I pulled one of the quotes from somebody there. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit here. A compelling mystery about a dystopian healthcare system gone wrong. Is that pretty close? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the book?
Yeah, that's a great one-liner. It's better than the one I usually use. But basically I took everything that can be frustrating about the changes going on in healthcare, right? So technology taking over, decision-making being taken away from us and our patients, and going more towards the insurance companies, and, just the humanism, feeling like it's going out of medicine, and didn't consciously take those themes and write the story, but you write, and you write what you're feeling, and that's kind of what came out. The story is about it's set in the near future. It's about a healthcare crash when a lot of physicians quit, and it sort of necessitates big changes being made in order to provide healthcare for everyone in the country, and do it in a way that they can make it work financially. So, there's a conspiracy, of course. It's a medical thriller. Would a medical thriller be without a conspiracy? But, it's also a story about people and relationships and flaws and all those sorts of things.
Awesome. Now, did you have some help publishing that, or did you do it yourself? How did you approach that aspect of it?
So I actually met someone at a conference who put me in touch with the editor that I used, and that was one of the most important pieces for me in getting this book published, is good editing. I had, I think, a compelling story, but after editing, I think I had a compelling story that was written in a way that was enjoyable to read, which I think
that's important.
There's a difference. So, when we got done with the editing process. I was extremely proud of this book, and I sort of said to myself, this will be published. I want people to read this. I wanted to do it the traditional route just because for me, the more people that are helping me, the better. And also there's some sense of validation in having someone pick up your book.
Sure.
As far as an agent or publisher. So I spent some time looking for agents, and it's a very frustrating, very challenging process. You get a lot of no's. Even people who go on to be bestsellers get a lot of no's. So that's what you constantly are telling yourself during this process. And I had some success with agents. I got very far in the process, but no one at the end of the day was able to pick it up. So I was sort of at a little bit of a standstill and trying to decide what to do next and sort of just waiting on those last few agents to get back to me. And I read a book called When Breath Becomes Air. Have you read it?
I haven't read it, but I've seen it recommended, and it's by a physician, correct? Am I thinking of the right one? Physician who passed?
Yeah, it's a memoir by a physician who was actually a neurosurgery resident when he got a terminal diagnosis. And he always thought, someday I'll write a book. And someday became now for him.
Right.
And when I finished that book, I told myself, you're never promised tomorrow. The book's done. It needs to be published. That's what you need to check it off your bucket list. You don't need an agent to do that. So I actually looked at that point at some small presses, and I got a couple offers and ended up going with a new press called Nightlark Publishing, and they've been wonderful. So I'm kind of, I don't know if you'd call it a hybrid between self-publishing and traditional, but there's certainly, I have a lot of responsibility, but she also takes on some of the things that I would rather not worry about, like formatting for an ebook and that sort of thing. So it's been a really good experience.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We talked a little bit about, the time frame to write the book, and you were pretty prolific there. What about this part of the journey from you've got the book done and you're either trying to figure out what publisher is going to pick it up or trying to figure out agents and handling this aspect of it? What kind of time frame are we looking at for this?
So for me, editing was about a 9-month process.
Wow. Okay.
And it's frustrating because you no longer have control over how long this is going to take you. It's not just you anymore, right? So
right.
I just had an editor who worked a chapter at a time, and then I would make changes, and then we'd move on to the next chapter. So, and of course she had other things going on too. And so that for me was the hardest part, probably because I was ready to start sending it out to agents. That part was exciting for me. But so that took about another 9 months, and then I started querying agents. And the thing to know about querying agents is a lot of them have a time frame, something like 8 to 12 weeks before you'll hear back from them. Some of them say, if I don't want to read anymore, you won't hear back from me.
Oh, geez.
So, yeah. So obviously you can't send to one agent, wait for their response, and then send to another. You do what's called multiple submissions, and most agents know that you're going to be doing that. If somebody does come back and ask for more, they may ask for exclusive rights for, a week, 2 weeks while they review the book. So basically you're saying, I won't send it to anyone, and I won't do anything, sign anything with anyone until you get back to me. But there are so many agents out there, and you really need to send a letter to them. So not only put their name and their agency on there, but something about why you would like my book and why I chose you. So that takes time. You can't just send out 50 emails a day that are generic, because they'll get ignored.
Wow.
So it's quite the process. I had another child by then, so I did a lot of that on maternity leave. But like I said, that's a good and bad experience. You get a lot of rejection, but I got a lot of nice comments too, and actually did a little bit of rewriting based on some of their comments. So that took me to probably another year and a half of that before signing with my publisher.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, as physicians, we kind of, have this, I don't know if it's a fear of failure, but, things just kind of go by a certain routine, and, we're trained not to fail and things like that. And not that this is a failure, but it's like, it seems like there's so much grit and determination that goes into getting something like this to to the end goal. So can you talk a little bit about the mindset that you had to, kind of take on to get this book finished and published and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, no, you are exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. So you study really hard, make a good grade on the test, right? That's
right.
Just sort of the agreement that you have with your studies. So, and maybe that was part of the appeal for me, is I know if I work hard, I can, succeed in medicine. Whereas even if you work hard, sometimes you don't succeed in the writing world, right? So I think it is a different mindset. There's no guarantee that if you work hard and write a great book that it'll ever see the light of day, or that anybody will ever read it. So not only do you have to do the writing and do the work, you have to, be ready for the rejection, and you have to do the work that it takes to get it out there. So the marketing and all of that doesn't always come naturally to us.
Right. Do you think that is something that's learned, or like, where does that come from you, that kind of the ability to do that? Because I think a lot of people just give up, just maybe get it written and be like, okay, it's not in the cards.
Well, for me, it took a lot of time that I could have been watching TV or
right.
hanging out with family, So for me, it was a big sacrifice to write the book. I enjoyed it, but I didn't write it for me. I didn't write it so that I could have a story to read. I wrote it so that I could say, I wrote a book and it's published, and here you can find it on this website. So for me, it wasn't complete until it was published. So I was ready to do pretty much whatever needed to be done. And that's why, I said earlier, I was ready to self-publish. I was mentally ready to self-publish because I had told people I was writing a book. I had told people I had written a book, and people were starting to ask, oh, well, where can I get the book? And I was like, I'm going to have an answer for them,
That's awesome. Is there anything else about the book or the process that you'd like to let our mostly physician audience know about?
Let's see. I think one thing that maybe I wish I had done sooner, or would tell someone to do if they're trying to write a book, but really anything creative, is make sure that you have an online presence sooner than later.
Yes.
It kind of feels like, why would I have a website if I don't have a product? But you can do a lot of things to start getting your name out there. You can do, interviews. A lot of people want to hear from doctors. You can blog, whatever floats your boat and sort of connects with you, you can do it. But definitely buy that domain name with your name on it and start controlling what comes up when people Google your name.
Yes. Because I think both of those things are important, so you can control, a little reputation management, control what comes up by, having those first places, that first page on Google be things that are controlled or influenced by you. And I'm starting to think of it, I don't know if it's completely come to fruition yet, but I kind of think of your online presence kind of like your CV, I mean, mm-hmm. You can put so much, it's one thing to write on a sheet of paper, oh, I can do this or that. It's another thing to show it. Sure. You show it on your website by what you've done. So I think those are, I think you're right, spot on about that. I've been thinking about that for a few years and feel the same way.
Yeah, and it takes time, right, to build that content. So it's a great idea to start it well before anybody would be Googling you.
For sure. So what is your work life or work balance? What are you doing now, and kind of what are you aiming towards? Are you still working as a physician? Are you still going to keep part of that? Are you going to try and develop the writing aspect? Where are you now, and where do you see that going?
So I work part-time, and actually I'm currently going through a career change, but I'll still be working sort of on a part-time basis. And I will continue to work for now. If my book sells 1 million copies, we may be having a different conversation. But I think for most people, even writers who consider that their full-time, job, it's hard to pay the bills
Sure.
with a writing gig. So I will continue to write just because I love it and it's a great outlet and it makes me interesting. But I also enjoy medicine, and I think there's a huge need for it. So huge need for physicians, that is. So I'm happy to be doing both, at least at this point.
Awesome. There was one of the closing keynotes at Podcast Movement was, I forget the name, but the creator of Lore, a very popular podcast, and he was a writer and was, taking on credit card debt, not making it, but tried to get a bunch of his novels published, kind of like amidst, the sea, as you were talking about, and just not having success, and had written these short stories and was ready to just throw them in the trash because, the doubt sets in. And as his hand was hovering over the trash bin on his computer, he's like, well, let me just send this to my buddy who kind of has some similar interests, is a little bit techie, see what they think. Should I publish these short stories or not? And his friend read them, came back and said, no, you shouldn't publish them, but you should start a podcast. And so he turned his short stories into a podcast, and millions of downloads later, now he's getting an Amazon Prime deal. It's getting turned into into movie or video, and it's just taken off. So it was very inspiring.
Thinking of the old radio stories before TV, right? Didn't people sit around the radio and listen to stories?
Yeah, we kind of forgot about that. That people used to hover around the radio. Obviously, I don't remember any of that, but I remember reading about it in history. Yeah, that used to be pretty commonplace before TV. And now with podcasting, what I've noticed is the storytelling podcasts are really popular right now and getting millions of downloads. So it's very interesting how history kind of repeats itself in slightly different form. But, I think, like you said earlier, I forget exactly which question, but, we're humans. We want to connect. We connect with stories. So I think in whatever format that we can make that connection, I think it'll be positive.
Absolutely.
All right. Any last tips for our audience there who maybe is looking to, who thinks they've got a novel in them, or is looking to transition into writing, and is trying to figure out kind of best practices to break into that space?
Well, like I said, you have to consider it a little bit of a job, and make a commitment, whatever that commitment is, whatever's doable for you, and stick to it as much as possible. And then, don't give up, because everybody says that they have a book in them. A lot of people do. But not a lot of people actually write that book. So be one of the few that actually gets it done.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Where can people pick up their book? Where's the best place for them to pick up a copy?
Well, my website is www.kvscruggs.com. And I have links to all the booksellers on my homepage. But Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com are the places online you can get it. And then it's in like every ebook format that exists.
Perfect. So. Perfect. And we'll link up to everything in the show notes. Where, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, where would be the best place for them to do that? On your website as well, or somewhere else?
Yeah, I think there's a place where you can email me, on one of the parts of my website there is.
Like a contact page or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the Doctors Unbound podcast. I think that your story is very inspiring, and for any physicians that are thinking about writing, I think you gave us a lot of actionable tips here. So thank you again very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Doctors Unbound podcast. Remember to head over to doctorsunbound.com to access all the show notes and resources discussed in this episode. Now, it's your turn to be unbound.